The old courthouse in Maplewood had stood for over a century, its stone walls weathered by decades of rain, sun, and storms. Inside, the air was heavy, a mixture of polished wood, old leather, and the faint scent of history clinging to the rafters. The morning sun filtered softly through the stained glass windows, scattering colors onto the cracked hardwood floors, as if the building itself tried to remind those inside of a time when justice meant more than just rulings written on paper. On this crisp October morning, James Whitaker arrived at the courthouse doors with a slow, steady gait that spoke of years lived hard but proud. He was 78, his hair silvered like the frost that clung to the autumn leaves outside. His navy blazer, once crisp and new, now bore soft wrinkles and faded patches like a map of his life's journey. His hands were calloused and lined, holding tightly to a worn newsboy cap, a simple relic of Sunday mornings spent at church and family gatherings long past. No one rose to greet him. The courtroom was filled with people, some restless, some indifferent, others barely glancing his way. To the many eyes around him, James was just another old man, taking up space, someone destined to be forgotten, like the crumbling house he had been accused of trespassing on. But James carried with him more than just years. He carried stories, memories, and a steadfast dignity that even time could not erode. Judge Samuel Collins sat behind the bench, a man in his 50s with a stern face softened only by a faint smirk that hinted at his certainty of the day's outcome. He barely spared James a glance, already convinced he had the verdict in hand. To him, James was a case number, a nuisance, another defendant who didn't belong in the courtroom, but in a retirement home. The bailiff's voice echoed through the chamber, case number 400 EB, State of Maine, versus James Whitaker. Charge unlawful entry on condemned property. The words fell heavy, a legal label for a man clinging to the last vestiges of his past. James moved to the defense table with measured steps alone, and unarmed, no attorney, no family members, no supporters to stand by his side. His eyes swept the room quietly, noting the whispers, the sideways glances, the barely concealed disdain. But his gaze held a calm that was both defiant and resigned. Judge Collins cleared his throat and tapped a stack of papers, his voice sharp. "Mr. Whitaker, you understand why you are here today?" "Yes, Your Honor." James replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the fatigue that weighed on his bones. The murmurs in the room grew louder, tinted with skepticism and a kind of pity reserved for those deemed irrelevant. James's answer was simple, almost too simple for the weight of the accusation. When asked why he had returned to the property on Willow Lane, James met the judge's eyes and said, "I was sitting on the porch." The courtroom fell into a sudden hush. His words were quiet, yet they carried the weight of decades, a lifetime etched in wood and stone, in memories that no one else remembered. "It's the last place that remembers me," he added softly. There was no anger, no plea for mercy, just the patient silence of a man who had long learned that some battles were not won with noise or outrage, but with quiet endurance. Judge Collins shifted uneasily in his seat. "Mr. Whitaker, this courtroom deals with facts, not sentiment," he said sharply. "You were warned to stay off that property, yet you returned." James nodded once. "I did." The judge's voice hardened. "Then the court must impose a penalty appropriate to repeated violations." As the judge prepared to issue the sentence, the atmosphere thickened, breaths grew shallow, and even the faintest sounds, the scratching of pens, the shuffling of papers, seemed amplified in the heavy silence. When the gavel finally fell, pronouncing 30 days in county jail, the words landed like stones on the hearts of those watching. But James did not flinch. There was no outcry, no protest, only a quiet dignity that filled the space between the echoes. Before being led away, James requested to make a phone call, a mundane ask, yet in that courtroom it carried the weight of quiet rebellion. As he dialed the number from memory, his voice was a soft murmur that nonetheless captured every ear in the room. "It's time. Bring them." And just like that, the last light of the morning seemed to glow a little brighter, hinting at the storm yet to come. The courtroom still lingered in the chill left by the recent sentencing. Soft sighs echoed from the shadows, blending with the rustling of papers and the hurried scratching of pens. Yet amidst it all, James Whitaker stood firm like an ancient oak, unshaken by the sentence or the scorn around him. When the bailiff approached with handcuffs in hand, every eye fixed on James, expecting resistance, a cry, or at least a protest. But no, a slight smile crossed his weathered face, a smile carrying countless stories and a lifetime of experience. It was not a smile of defiance, but one of acceptance and dignity. Slowly, James rose carefully, picking up his worn newsboy cap and placing it on his head as if preparing for a leisurely walk, not an involuntary journey into incarceration. Each step was calm and deliberate, trained by decades of hardship. The atmosphere grew heavy and suffocating. Everyone awaited some sign in action or a word that might shatter the thick silence. Then James spoke, his voice soft, yet impossible to ignore. "May I make a phone call, Your Honor?" His eyes met Judge Collins, steady and unafraid. Judge Collins, impatient and eager to conclude the trial, arched an eyebrow dismissively. "A phone call? Now who would you possibly call at this hour?" James did not reply immediately. He stood patient like a statue in a storm. "It is an important call," he said slowly. The judge shrugged and reluctantly granted permission. "Fine. One call. 1 minute. Make it quick." The bailiff retrieved an old courtroom phone, a simple device with no screen or contacts. James took it, his aged but steady fingers dialing from deep memory. Silence again filled the room, now tense and expectant. The ring echoed, drawing every gaze toward James. He lifted the receiver and whispered warmly, "It's time. Bring them." Only 4 words, no explanation, no plea, just a command. Yet their weight filled the room and shifted the tense air. Everyone present, from Judge Collins to lawyers, clerks, and onlookers, could not look away from the old man making this call. They sensed something greater was unfolding, a turning point, an inevitable storm. Down the hallway came measured footsteps. The sound of firm heels clicked sharply, resonating through the still courtroom like bells tolling a summons. The heavy doors swung open, and a woman entered with confidence and power. It was Caroline Whitaker, James's only daughter, whom he had just called. Caroline was not only a beloved family member, but also a highly respected attorney known across the state's legal and political circles. She wore a tailored black suit, her tall figure moving with resolute determination, as if each step could alter the fate of the trial. Behind her followed a team of 3 attorneys in matching navy blue suits, carrying thick files and laptops. Their arrival instantly transformed the courtroom atmosphere from suspicion and contempt to respect and caution. Carolyn walked directly to her father's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, a steadying strength only family can offer. Her gaze held no anger or bitterness, only steadfast resolve and iron will. "Your Honor," Caroline announced clearly, her voice ringing through the chamber. "Before this trial continues, there are important legal documents you must review." She opened a heavy leather briefcase and laid down a thick stack of certified and notarized paperwork. Copies of property deeds for the house on Willow Lane, military certificates, engineering licenses, and awards James had earned for his vital contributions to public works and disaster response. All were undeniable facts, evidence that the court and prosecution had long ignored throughout the previous proceedings. Judge Collins sat frozen, his once confident demeanor replaced with visible unease. He had believed victory was assured. Now he faced the collapse of his own biases and errors. Confidence gave way to discomfort as truth lay bare before him. All eyes in the courtroom shifted from doubt to astonishment, from apathy to attention and respect. Even the cold, previously unyielding prosecutor lowered her gaze in silence, while clerks and spectators leaned forward, absorbing every detail. James Whitaker, once dismissed as a petty offender, now stood beside his daughter, his calm eyes filled with quiet strength. He needed no words, his silence spoke volumes. The atmosphere in the Maplewood courtroom had shifted palpably the moment Caroline Whitaker stepped through the oak doors. Her presence alone seemed to command the space, and as she unfolded the thick dossiers filled with certified documents, the weight of history pressed firmly upon every person in the room. Judge Samuel Collins, once the embodiment of judicial authority, sat rigid, the veneer of control slipping with every page he turned. His eyes darted over the paperwork, property deeds, legal filings, military service records, engineering certificates and awards, recognizing James Whitaker's decades of service during critical state infrastructure projects and disaster relief efforts. Each document was a stone in the foundation of James's legacy, stones the courtroom had overlooked or deliberately ignored. The evidence was irrefutable. The house on Willow Lane had never fully passed into city ownership due to bureaucratic oversight. More than that, James was not merely a trespasser, but a man deeply woven into the fabric of the community, a living testament to sacrifice and dignity. Lawyers and clerks leaned forward, captivated by the unraveling narrative. The once dismissive prosecutor's stern features softened as she lowered her pen, eyes now fixed on the unfolding truth. The gallery fell silent, the earlier whispers replaced by a shared recognition that the scales of justice were tipping. Caroline stood unwavering beside her father. Her hands calmly folded, her eyes locking with the judge's with an unyielding resolve. She spoke not with fury, but with a measured clarity that pierced the courtroom's haze. "Your Honor," she began, "these documents reveal a truth long obscured, a truth that demands this court to reconsider its position. My father's connection to this property is not one of illegal occupation, but of rightful ownership, clouded only by administrative neglect." The judge swallowed hard, the air thick with tension. For a moment, the power dynamics of the room reversed. It was not the gavel that ruled, but undeniable evidence. Caroline's voice continued, "Moreover, these records speak to a lifetime of service, a lifetime in which my father has contributed to this community in ways few have. To dismiss him as a mere trespasser is an injustice not only to him, but to the very principles this courtroom should uphold." A murmur spread through the courtroom, but Caroline silenced it with a single raised hand. "I urge this court to recognize the full story, to acknowledge the man behind the charges, and to restore his name and dignity." The judge closed the folder slowly, the weight of his responsibility heavy on his shoulders. His eyes flicked between James and Caroline, the man and the woman who had transformed a simple trespassing case into a profound reckoning. For James, this moment was one of quiet vindication. He had stood through the judgment and scorn, but now as truth emerged from the shadows, the courtroom was forced to confront not only its error, but the deeper failures of the system. Outside the courtroom, the autumn leaves danced in the breeze, oblivious to the storm unfolding within. But inside, history was being rewritten, one document, one voice at a time. Caroline's team methodically presented the evidence, walking the courtroom through the timelines, the ownership records, and the many contributions James had made. Each fact built upon the last, forming a narrative too compelling to deny. The judge's composure cracked as he questioned witnesses, reviewed the legal precedents, and grappled with the undeniable truth. His earlier arrogance gave way to humility as he realized that the justice he had assumed was served was in fact a miscarriage. Witnesses who had initially testified against James now appeared uncomfortable, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The prosecutor, previously unwavering, took notes diligently, her expression one of reconsideration. James, meanwhile, remained a pillar of strength. He listened attentively, his demeanor serene, aware that this was the moment his years of patience and perseverance were coming to fruition. As the hearing neared its end, Caroline addressed the court one final time. "Justice is not merely the enforcement of laws. It is the recognition of truth, the protection of the vulnerable, and the restoration of dignity." Today I ask this court to rectify the wrongs done to my father, and in doing so, honor the principles upon which our justice system is founded. The courtroom was silent, every heart pounding in anticipation. Judge Collins took a deep breath, his voice steady but soft. In light of the new evidence and testimonies presented, this court hereby vacates all charges against Mr. James Whitaker. The court recognizes his rightful ownership of the property in question. A hush fell over the room, followed by a slow, reverent exhale as the weight of the ruling settled upon everyone present. James Whitaker's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, not of triumph, but of profound relief. It was not a victory won through combat, but through unyielding dignity and truth. Caroline reached out and gently squeezed her father's shoulder, their shared glance conveying a lifetime of struggle and a future reclaimed. Outside the courtroom, reporters who had gathered awaited news, their cameras poised. But James had no need for the spotlight. He walked out quietly, head held high, his story now etched into the annals of justice. This chapter closed not with fanfare, but with the steady beat of justice restored, a testament to the power of perseverance and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As the courtroom slowly emptied of its spectators, a heavy stillness lingered, not just of physical silence, but of unspoken reckoning. Judge Samuel Collins remained seated, his hands resting on the polished oak bench, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The weight of the evidence had forced a crack in his once unwavering certainty. What had seemed clear-cut moments ago now felt muddied by the undeniable truth Caroline Whitaker had brought forth. For years, Judge Collins had carried himself with an air of authority, believing in the infallibility of his judgments in the system he represented. But today, confronted by facts that challenged not only the case before him, but the very assumptions that had guided his rulings, a quiet transformation began. He glanced toward James Whitaker, the man he had so readily condemned, and saw not a trespasser, but a symbol of resilience and forgotten dignity. Around him, the courtroom staff shifted uneasily. The prosecutor, a woman usually sharp and composed, sat quietly, her usual fervor replaced by a solemn acknowledgement of the miscarriage of justice unfolding before her. The bailiff, who had once prepared to restrain James, now moved with respectful restraint, as if honoring an unspoken truce. Judge Collins cleared his throat, his voice subdued but firm. In light of the new evidence and testimonies presented, this court hereby vacates all charges against Mr. James Whitaker. The court recognizes his rightful ownership of the property in question. A breathless pause followed, as if the room itself was absorbing the gravity of the declaration. No applause, no cheers, only the profound silence of realization. Justice, long deferred, had finally been served. James Whitaker's face remained composed, though his eyes shimmered with unspoken emotion. He had not sought this vindication through anger or confrontation, but through a lifetime of steadfast perseverance. Now, as the court acknowledged the truth, a subtle but powerful relief washed over him. Beside him, Caroline allowed herself a small smile, a shared victory born of love, faith, and unyielding commitment. Their bond, forged in struggle and hope, was palpable to all who witnessed it. Outside the courtroom, news of the ruling spread quickly. Reporters gathered at the courthouse steps. Microphones raised, cameras rolling. Yet James made no rush to the spotlight. Instead, he and Caroline stepped forward slowly, heads held high, embodying the quiet dignity that had carried them through years of hardship. A reporter called out, "Mr. Whitaker, do you have a statement?" James paused, then spoke softly but clearly. "I never sought justice. I sought remembrance." Those words echoed beyond the cameras, striking a chord with a nation too often blind to the stories of its elders and forgotten citizens. They spoke of memory, of history, and of the enduring spirit of those who refused to be erased. The courthouse steps, bathed in the golden glow of afternoon sun, bore witness to more than a legal victory. They stood as a monument to the resilience of one man and the awakening of a community's conscience. Judge Collins watched from the bench, humbled and reflective. The gavel he once wielded with absolute conviction now rested quietly, a symbol not just of power, but of responsibility, the responsibility to seek truth even when it challenges one's own beliefs. In the days that followed, the story of James Whitaker stirred conversations about justice, dignity, and the many lives overlooked by the machinery of law. His case became a beacon inspiring others to stand firm and speak out. For James, the ruling was not an end, but a new beginning, a chance to reclaim his place in a world that had tried to forget him. Together with Caroline, he embarked on a path to restore not only his home, but also the deeper sense of belonging and respect that every person deserves. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the steps of Maplewood Courthouse as James Whitaker and his daughter Caroline descended slowly, their figures bathed in a soft golden light. The crowd gathered outside. Reporters, neighbors, curious onlookers held their breath, waiting for a statement, a gesture, something to capture the magnitude of the moment. But James sought none of that. With deliberate calm, he reached up and adjusted the worn newsboy cap atop his silver hair, a small familiar act that carried a lifetime of meaning. The weight of his journey, the years of waiting, the battles fought in silence. The quiet endurance settled into the very fabric of that simple gesture. A voice called out from the crowd, "Mr. Whitaker, do you have any words for us?" James paused, his eyes sweeping over the sea of faces. Some hopeful, some skeptical, others reflecting the weariness of a system stretched thin. Then with a softness that belied its power, he said, "I was never looking for justice. I was looking for remembrance." The words hung in the air like a prayer, a testament to the lives so often overlooked, the stories so often forgotten. They spoke not only of the man who stood before them, but of every quiet soul who has ever been judged too quickly or dismissed too easily. Caroline stepped beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, a symbol of strength passed from one generation to the next. Together they embodied the resilience of a family, the unbreakable bond forged through trials and love. The cameras flashed, the murmurs grew louder, but James's gaze remained steady, rooted in something far deeper than the noise of the moment. This was not about headlines or fleeting applause. It was about dignity, the dignity that exists whether the world watches or not. In the days that followed, the story of James Whitaker sparked conversations across Maplewood and beyond. Community leaders spoke of the need to look closer, to listen harder, to remember that justice is not a mere procedure, but a living, breathing ideal that must include compassion and understanding. The house on Willow Lane, once a symbol of conflict and neglect, became a rallying point for change. Efforts were made to restore not just the physical structure, but the sense of belonging it represented. Local volunteers gathered to clean and repair, sharing stories passed down from James's generation, ensuring that memory was preserved alongside bricks and mortar. For James, the journey was far from over. Though freed from legal charges, he knew that true justice extends beyond a courtroom verdict. It lies in healing communities, bridging divides, and honoring the lives that build them. Each morning he walked the familiar streets with Caroline by his side, greeting neighbors who once overlooked him, but now stopped to offer a kind word or a nod of respect. His story became a quiet beacon, a reminder that every person's past holds value, every life matters. In quiet moments, James would sit on the porch of his restored home, watching the sun set beyond the trees, feeling the gentle breeze carry whispers of the past and hopes for the future. The newsboy cap, worn and frayed, remained perched atop his head, not just a hat, but a symbol of endurance, pride, and the unyielding spirit that had brought him through. Caroline often joined him there, sharing plans to help others whose voices had been silenced, to fight for policies that recognize the dignity of every citizen, no matter their age or circumstance. Their legacy was not written in grand gestures or loud proclamations, but in the steady, unwavering commitment to truth, justice, and remembrance. And as the seasons turned and years passed, The story of James Whitaker lived on, etched into the hearts of those who heard it, inspiring a deeper understanding that justice is more than a verdict. It is a promise kept through compassion, patience, and respect. Closing reflection. In a world too often measured by noise and haste, James's life stands as a testament to the power of quiet strength. His journey reminds us all that dignity does not ask for permission to exist. It simply is. And when we choose to see, to remember, and to honor those quiet legacies, we build a foundation upon which true justice can endure.